everybody. Welcome to the Hunter's Quest podcast. This is your host, Hunter McWaters. It is great to be with you guys as always. Today, I know I say this every week, but today I have a really cool episode for you. I'm really excited to share with you. I've been working on getting my guest on for a while now. He's been going through some difficult stuff in his life, which you may have seen from their family online. But I got a chance to meet him at SHOT Show and just kind of put a face to the name and was able to get him on the podcast. So really excited today to be talking to Branlin Shockey. Now, you may or may not be familiar with Branlin. Obviously, his dad is Jim Shockey. His sister is Ava Shockey. But Branlin is the guy behind the lens and behind the computer screen editing for, almost all of Jim Shockey's amazing work, going back for a long time. Branlin also works with Cameron Haynes. He produced the Once We Were Wolves film, which is an excellent film. That's kind of his most recent work. So Branlin is a very talented storyteller, videographer, editor, producer, all the above. I highly recommend you go check out Once We Were Wolves, the Cam Haynes film. And anything he's done with his dad, obviously, is amazing. And a lot of that stuff he did when he was a very young man. And he's self-taught. He taught himself how to edit on YouTube. So it can be done, folks, if you want to get started. Now, of course, it helps to have your dad being Jim Shockey, but I truly believe that Branlin could and would have gotten into this and done this even if his father was not who he was. He's a gifted storyteller, a thoughtful guy, and we have a great conversation today about a lot of different topics. And it's a really good episode, so I hope you guys enjoy it. And when I was thinking about it, the episode this week, a verse came to mind. I was kind of thinking about fathers and sons, and just how there's one point in our conversation where Branlin mentions that his dad and him both kind of had the realization that Branlin was not born to be a hunter first. He really feels like his calling is storytelling. Which is awesome and is very unique. And a lot of guys get into telling hunting stories because they want to hunt. But if you are going to really achieve the highest level of being a storyteller, that really has to be your primary focus. So I feel like at that moment it might have been a painful thing, but I think that God is a good father and gives us exactly what we need. And I think the fact that God gave Branlin Jim as his dad, and the fact that God gave Jim Branlin as his son was just shows his sovereignty and the awesomeness of his will and everything, even though it might not have seemed like the plan in the moment, So the verse came to mind for that was Matthew 7, starting in verse 7. Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and it will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, and the one who seeks finds. And to the one who knocks it will be opened. Or which one of you, if his son asks for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, will give him a serpent? If you then, who are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father who is in heaven give good things to those who ask him? And that doesn't always, look like how we might think it might look in the moment. But I truly believe that God is a good father, and he gives good things to us when we ask, especially, when we're connected to him. And, bad stuff still happens in the world, but not everything that happens in the world is of God. So anyway, without too much further on that, I hope you guys enjoy this episode. I do want to mention a couple things. I want to say thanks to my sponsors. As always, Barnes Bullets. They have that new 300 PRC they just came out with. I got a couple cases waiting for me over there. I can't wait to try out this season. Onyx Hunt, as always, Loopholed Optics, and Black Ovis. If you guys are listening right now, it's a great time to gear up for the next season ahead. This time of year, I pretty much make it part of my morning routine to jump on CamoFire at camofire.com and see what they got over there as far as sales. They have flash sales every single day on tons of great turkey hunting stuff, whitetail hunting stuff, and western hunting stuff. Some of the best brands out there. I mean, Argali, Hilleberg, Seek Outside, Crispy, Benchmade knives, Jet Boil. I mean, just everything you need from camping and hunting to, trail cameras to turkey hunting stuff. They got it all, packs, everything. So go over to Black Ovis or keep an eye on Camo Fire for sales. But definitely check out everything got over there. That's where I get all my gear, and I love working with those guys. So check them out. Last thing I want to say, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you're listening to this, yesterday I released a spring bear hunting film from last year. Me and Luke spent about a week in Idaho hunting bears. It was a tough hunt, but a lot happened, including me almost drowning in a pack raft. So you don't want to miss that. So go to my YouTube channel right now, watch the spring bear film, and subscribe while you're there. It's super helpful. And go ahead and follow along as well at The Hunter's Quest on social media, and share the show, share the podcast with friends and family. Right now is kind of a slower time. People are not listening to podcasts as much probably, but I really need your help to push through with that. And you can help me out a lot and spend $0 by subscribing to my YouTube channel and sharing this show with friends and family, the podcast that is. I really, really appreciate it. So go check out that spring bear film, hit the subscribe button, and enjoy this episode this week with Branlin Shockey. See you on the next one.
Man, I need to work on my Zoom shot here. Your background was way cooler than mine.
Yeah, it's getting a little busy, but I just have every time I come back from a trip, I have something else to put on the shelf, and I just can't help myself.
Yeah, I like it, man.
Thanks, dude. Yeah, I wish I could show you. I'm working on a miniature version of your dad's museum back there behind me. I got fossils and elk ivories and just all kinds of cool stuff.
Man, that's epic. At one point, Dad's museum did look like that, but it was a long time ago.
Yeah. Look at this one we found in New Mexico.
You found an ammonite?
Yeah, actually, my videographer actually saw it first, but he gave it to me. And now he's like, dang, I wish I had kept that.
Well, yeah. If I'm finding ammonite, I'm not giving it to you if we ever go on a trip.
Oh, no. I wouldn't expect you to.
That's my dream, man. I'm always looking for fossils on any trips we do.
Me too. Go ahead.
No, go for it.
No, we went on an oddhead hunt this year, and I shot one the second day. It was a 3-day hunt, and like the third morning, I just went out and like rock hunted, and I found all these sweet rocks, dude.
That's incredible, man.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I've got until 11, so I've got an hour.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm already rolling.
Sorry about that. It's my fault. Oh, awesome. Great.
You're good. But if you guys are just joining us, welcome to the Hunter's Quest podcast. This is your host, Hunter McWaters. I'm joined today by Branlin Shockey. How you doing, man?
Very well, man. How are you doing?
Good. Thanks for coming on. I've been working on you for a while, but that's okay. And
my fault.
No, you had a lot going on, and that's great. And I met you at SHOT Show at the OSG booth, and then, so yeah, glad to have you on, man. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for taking the time.
Well, it's an honor for you to have me on here. I appreciate it. Thank you for asking.
Absolutely. You haven't done that many podcasts.
No, I try not to actually. I get asked. I don't do that many. I don't really know why. I think that part of it is I just don't. I don't know that I have a lot to offer people that if it's just in the hunting space,
Mm-hmm.
like a lot of people are coming at me from, wow, like let's talk about hunting trips. And I can, but generally, my perspective might be a little bit different than what theirs is. They want me to talk like in detail about the hunts and, what happens and the animals and stuff. And I can talk a little bit about that, but usually, it's going to be a disappointment. So I, trying to avoid taking too many of them. But yeah, man, it was awesome to meet you at SHOT. And I'm glad we finally made this happen, and sorry for taking so long.
No, don't apologize, man. Everything happens in its proper season. And yeah, that's why I actually want to have you on, because I see myself as a hunter, of course, but also a storyteller and a filmmaker and stuff like that. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk to you about, is like storytelling. And I think it's just an interesting perspective that you don't get a lot of times. So it was actually when I watched Once We Were Wolves, I was like, oh man, I want to do a podcast with Branlin. And so anyway, it took a while, but glad to have you here, man. That's kind of what I want to dive into today.
Well, man, I'm ready to go. Let's do it. What did you think of the film?
I thought it was really cool, very unique. It's been about probably 6 months since I saw it, so it's not fresh, to be honest. But
Yeah.
it was very unique. I really liked all the kind of like stock footage and stuff, and like cool old time stuff in the beginning.
Yeah.
And I felt
Yeah.
felt you guys told the story of like hunting very well to a. And I think that's very much part of Cam's whole thing is to the non-hunting world, and I love that kind of bridging the gap there. You know, something I strive to do a little bit, or I've been thinking about, is how to like bridge that gap from like the adventurous, animal-loving type people, which I am. I love
Yeah.
animals and I love adventure,
Hmm.
but I also love hunting, and kind of bridging some of that gap a little bit. You know,
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
so
Uh,
I love the way you guys did that, and then yeah, it was a great film. But
cool. Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you. Yeah, the so that perspective is the most natural for me, right? Not talking to hardcore hunters, even though obviously like I mean, grew up in a hardcore hunting family.
yeah,
Uh, so but from my perspective, it's always been easier for me to think of, okay, if I'm looking at this from outside of our, core industry, what are people going to, what's going to be most effective style of storytelling, or what's the most effective way to tell a story to people who maybe aren't familiar with what we do, or are on the fence about it, or are maybe they talk to their buddies about one day going out onto the mountain somewhere with a bow or a rifle,
hmm
like the granddad did, but they maybe haven't taken that step.
yeah,
Uh, so and that to me has always been sort of like I don't know, gateway is not the right word, but the the um, the sort of I don't know, the appeal to me
yeah,
about telling these type of stories is reaching that audience. That's kind of the hardest one I think to shift, but also the most it can be the most effective.
yeah.
We're not
Do
an echo chamber. Sorry, we're not in an echo chamber where we're changing literally people's perceptions and lives, and so I try and do that through storytelling if I can.
So is that sort of like, so I guess, when you're producing for outdoor TV, you have to know your audience. So I guess, in that case, which was your background, um, is that kind of been a shift as of late, as you've kind of shifted out of more of the kind of predominantly on outdoor TV onto kind of newer stuff like that? Has that kind of been like a shift in your whole kind of mindset or goals there?
Yeah, great question. I don't think that I've shifted too much on how I try to put projects together or tell stories, but certainly, if you do something for, say a channel like a TV channel distribution platform, like Outdoor Channel, and this is great. There are some guardrails you follow for the audience that you are reaching,
Mm-hmm.
um, and that actually helps you in a way, right? Because your direction's set, you kind of know there's a quote unquote formula you follow. But if you put something on YouTube, which I think is super cool and powerful, and by the way, Once Were Wolves really is the first thing I put on YouTube that's,
Mm.
a longer piece. You can do whatever you want.
And Cam almost didn't let you put it out, it sounds like.
He almost didn't let me put it. Yeah, actually, yeah, no, we had that done for like a year.
I know. I
Yeah,
listened
Once
to
Were
the
Wolves was
podcast you
done.
did with Cam, and I was like, okay.
Yeah, yeah, no, it was done. It was done for a long time, and I was just sitting on it. I was like, man, I
That must
really
have been so hard, man. Because as soon as I like, as a creator, as soon as I finish something, it's like, I want to like just get it out there.
yeah, yeah. Actually, it's funny. I'm kind of the opposite.
Oh,
I
really?
spent well. Okay, so here you think that, I mean, are people in your audience here, are they looking for some, you think a lot of people are in film or trying to, tell better stories or film, their adventures
Yeah.
and hunting?
I mean, I've done a lot of podcasts with guys like Adam Foss and
Oh, cool. Yeah.
just
Yeah.
like guys like other producers or sometimes my videographers that I work with, or just other guys like that. So yeah, it's a theme kind of probably that runs through the podcast a little bit.
Okay. So I found that, and this is changing a little bit now, but my entire, any quote unquote, success I've had, and by the way, I was very lucky, obviously, to have, my dad around when I was growing up. So I could always access,
Yeah,
Jim Shockey, which, I understand is a leg up, but,
you get great
um,
content right there all the time.
well, yeah, well, sure. Yeah. So of course, but I always found that the best success I ever had was focusing on post. So
Mm,
the stuff in the field is awesome. It's very important, but if we shot for a day in the field, I'd spend 10 days in post.
hmm
And I'm not even exaggerating, especially when I started out, I would literally sit there. and I would spend a day on like a shot, trying to get some perfect, I don't know, putting some little graphic stuff on it or some, speed ramping or
Yeah.
something. And I'm trying,
And
probably
you're
not a
all
shot.
self-taught too, which is pretty impressive.
Well, that's the other thing. I had to learn all this. Yeah,
Yeah.
when I was starting. Yeah, so so part of it's because I didn't know what the hell I was doing. But spending that time in post and once for wolves is an example of this. The shots we're taking from history, right? We're trying to match them from so the guys walking out to their camp and the historic shot from the 20s. We're trying to match that with like Cam and Kip going out to their camp in the modern era. It takes a while to find those shots, right? And so if anybody's thinking about getting into this or trying to improve their storytelling, I would say uh, definitely do not forget about the post side. Sitting in front of you got to put your butt in a
Oh
chair
yeah.
for 10 hours a day, look at a screen. It sucks, but that's how I feel like really take something from like 90% to 100%,
100.
to like
Yeah.
give its best potential, right?
Totally, man. I mean, like for me, I was thinking about the other day. Um, I mean, there are parts of it that suck, like you said, like it can be a grind, but also like I've grown to really love editing, because that I feel like that's the last place in my like career right now, my life where like I'm doing art. Because like
Yeah.
I do film some in the field still, but usually I have a videographer with me. But like when I sit down to put together that film, that's where like the art comes out and the so I actually love it, man. But it's kind of addicting, man. It's like you start, you're like,
Well,
but
that's
I
what I'm
think for
saying.
guys getting
I don't,
into it, it could be more of a grind.
yeah, I don't know when to finish, right? That's what I'm saying. Because you can
Well, video
all,
products are never done, right? You just run out of time.
yeah, yeah. So we, technically we had Once Were Wolves finished, but I always would come back with
Of
it, fiddle
course.
around it. And even now, and this is true with anything I've done, you give it 6 months, you go back and you look at it, I'm like, oh man, like I could definitely do better through this sequence.
Yeah.
Uh, obviously it doesn't always make sense to do that, especially when, this is your sort of paid gig, and you have to be efficient. But yeah, I don't think with posts involved, I think you're never really done. You're just
Yeah.
finished.
It's like napping down an arrowhead or something. It's like, when is it sharp enough? When are you
Yeah,
done? Like, but if you
totally.
go too crazy, there's like nothing left.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you get caught up on it and you're like
Yeah.
focused on this little arrowhead, and then yeah, you got to take a step back. Actually, that is one trick I learned. I learned that from reading what did I read? Uh Stephen King wrote a book about writing.
Mm.
I think it's like on writing, I think is what it's called. And I read that, and as he talked about his process, he said what he does is he finishes a manuscript and then he puts it in a drawer, and he just doesn't tell anybody, he leaves it there for like 6 months, and then he comes back to it because now you have fresh eyes.
Hmm.
Right now you can look at it and be objective. Otherwise, you're way too close to the product. And so, actually, it was kind of a blessing for Once Your Wolves because I did make some changes. After 6 months of not looking at it, you
Yeah.
take it. Okay, now I'm objective. I can see. Oh yeah, no, this section drags, or this section is too quick, or needs some more background here.
Yeah.
So that's if you have the time, it actually can help.
Yeah. That's actually something that I do. I never wasn't really intentional, but usually when I get back off a hunt, I like putting the rough cut together like real quick while it's like fresh in my mind, like
Hmm.
what happened, and then. But then I won't. I'll like go on another hunt, and So right now I have probably like 6 or 7 pretty good rough cuts that I can like just go back to and just start polishing. So, um,
Cool.
yeah, that is kind of nice. I never thought about it like that, but that's kind of nice. Um, I want to talk about it later, but since we're kind of already on the topic, I mean, you were talking earlier about reaching non-hunters, and like I think that's so important. Obviously, hunter recruitment is huge, um, and YouTube is a great platform. I love it. Um, but I also hate it. So,
Yeah.
so like, what do you how do you feel about the current like state of like hunting media and like storytelling? Because it feels like we're kind of in flux right now between it's like the industry has like one foot in TV still and one foot on YouTube. Um, and I get that. And I'm not like against YouTube, but at the same time, I don't want to put. I was thinking about this last night. I don't want to put the future of this type of storytelling media. I don't want to like hand over the keys to hunting storytelling to big tech. And it feels
Yeah.
like in a way we're doing that. And they could literally decide tomorrow, okay, no more hunting on YouTube if they want. So I don't know.
Yeah.
What are your
Yeah. Those
thoughts?
these are big thoughts. Yeah. Um, hmm. Good question. So first of all, I think that storytelling is, you know, looking at this from a 40,000 foot view, I think it extends far beyond the platforms, right? You know, if we don't have YouTube, then we've got, you know, whatever the next platform is. All the way down to if you take out everything away from us and they, you know, cut off our phones, then you and I are telling stories around campfires, right?
That's true.
Story like we tell ourselves stories in order to live. That's
Mm,
not my quote. That's Joan Didion, but uh, I think that's true, right? Anything, any actions we take, anything we see, we tell either ourselves or our people. We communicate largely, most effectively, I feel like through storytelling. That's how we sort of justify, you know, our actions, other people's actions, you know, random actions. It's all storytelling. So I believe that if tomorrow YouTube said, you know what, guys, we're shutting all hunting down, I think very quickly we'd have another platform
yeah.
to tell our story. Now, I say that, you know, big picture though, yeah, of course we can be censored and all kinds of stuff can happen. Who knows with politics? But I do personally have faith in the idea that people want to hear stories and want to hear particularly good stories. And I do feel like with, you know, one thing that uh, with platforms, right, distribution platforms like YouTube being so ubiquitous, I do feel like you have to have really good work to stand out. And I'm saying good, you know, you got to define good, right? You know, there's 3 hour movies that win Oscars that I don't necessarily think are good for me, right? I'm not
Yeah.
stoked about them. So I mean like effective things that are going to reach people and that they want to see for whatever reason. That's a tough one to figure out. Back when you had back when maybe, you know, TV was more dominant as a distribution platform, I think
Yeah.
you can get away with having content that maybe wasn't, you know, it wasn't competitive. But you, for whatever reason, there's barriers to entry in TV, and you can get your content out there. So that's what people did, you know, myself included to some extent. So I think YouTube is awesome. I think that, you know, it truly is. I mean, and so I'll give you an example. I get sent work sometimes, right, by people starting out. They want to film their hunts or they want to, you know, tell stories in the outdoors. And I don't even ask for, you know, a resume or anything like that. If they're asking to work together, I just say, man, send me your best stuff. Send me anything you want me to look at. And you can tell almost instantly if, well, first of all, there's a learning curve, right? So some people are in their beginning journey. Um, but you can very quickly, I think, differentiate yourself on something like YouTube where everybody's on an even playing field. And I think that's really exciting and cool.
Yeah. Very much so. Yeah. Um, do you think that um, it's possible to take it too far to in a point where you're sterilizing hunts too much, like too much to get to like those non-hunting type folks? Do you ever see that coming out?
Yeah, definitely. That's a great question. I've never even thought of that. Sterilize them too much. Yeah, I mean, you can sterilize reality, right? Like to some extent, anytime you are condensing, you know, 10 hunt journey into 20 minutes,
Yeah,
you are sterilizing the
sure.
actual event, right? I mean that happen. I mean that's unavoidable. Unavoidable. If I gave you a 40-hour rough cut to watch you, I mean, everyone was going to watch it. Uh, so yeah, 100%. That's a danger. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, you know, and I think the other way around too. I think you can misrepresent hunting as well, you know, pretty
Hmm.
easily, right? You can focusing on the wrong things or being not sensitive. You know, I think it is important that we're sensitive to viewers and what, um, maybe sensitive is not the right word. We respect viewers, and even though we may have potentially, you know, differing opinions on things, we respect their opinions.
Hmm.
We're tolerant of others, so I try to, you know, try and remember that if I'm telling stories. But I don't know if that's the correct way to do it. Maybe we just have to be, you know, not worry at all about that. I don't know. So yeah, it's definitely that's a tough question. I don't have an answer. I think there's a line somewhere there, but it's a
Yeah,
it's a gray area for sure.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, these are things I always kind of think about, and I ask a lot of my storyteller type guests about. I do in some ways. Like again, it's a weird balancing act. It's like everything in life. There's no right or wrong. It's always somewhere in the middle. But there's you want to reach those non-hunters. You want to represent an authentic way, but at the same time, representing an authentic way goes to the other side where, like, killing is killing. It's not always clean. Like in the end of We Were Wolves as a perfect example, or some hunts I had this year. And I almost felt like in some parts of the industry, I felt like this kind of almost like inertia towards, not showing kill shots intentionally or whatever it may be. So I don't know. It's just something I always think about. What's the line there? So I don't
Okay,
know.
I got you. Yeah. So I don't think that is something we should consider too much. I think that, yeah, I think that we should be gritty in what we show. I think we should, authentic gets thrown, that word gets thrown around, but really like true authenticity, the what I've seen in the field, and it sounds like what you've probably seen, those moments you have with, I'll use Once Were Wolves as an example just because I'm familiar with it, but that camaraderie that happened towards the end of that film was very real, right? The feelings that we had there, myself included, were real. I mean, we were ready to go into like battle, or as close as you get to battle these days, right?
Right.
Without actually being on the front line somewhere. I'm not trying to compare ourselves to like a literal military battle, but
Right. Right. No, I understand.
there's a brotherhood there that if you cut that kind of stuff out, I think that I don't know, you lose, to me, you lose the authenticity of it, and you also lose the effectiveness of it. I mean, what's the draw now, right? Like that, uh, going and killing a grizzly bear is, for a lot of people, something that's difficult to defend. Um, and I think that, just speaking for myself, part of the draw of doing something like that is that we nowadays, it's difficult for us to find things where you get into those situations where you form brotherhoods like that.
Yeah.
Like, the top level sports teams and stuff probably. But other than that, most people going to 9 to 5, going to the office, and doing their grocery shopping after at the end of the day, and they're not going to find that. And so, yeah, to answer your question, I think we need to be aware of that. I think we shouldn't be haphazard with how we tell stories and what we say, but I do think that we should be real
Yeah.
always.
Yeah. I mean, there is something about hunting that's very unique, especially like, backcountry hunting and stuff like that, where it is like, I use that a lot, that analogy a lot. It's other than literally fighting in a war, which I'm not comparing it to. It's one of the closest things you can probably do to that type of situation. In terms of the danger, especially with grizzly, it's something that can turn around and kill you. Like, I mean, so there's something very special about it, like that. It's not just like dudes. I think you may have even said it, like slamming beers and going out and shooting animals. I mean, like there's
Yeah.
something very real, something very human, and even when it comes to like killing that animal, it's like a moment in time that is so much effort went into it, and it's so just unique and just like heavy, that it's just like there's nothing else quite like it. And I think even as a storyteller, even if you're not into hunting, it's such a cool thing to capture because it's so unique.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and again, just me being a story, like I look at myself as, I'd certainly qualify as a hunter, but I don't see that as my primary sort of category, right? Like I'm
Yeah,
a storyteller, and I could, if we were out there and it was not grizzly bear hunting, it was something completely different. I'd try my very best and tell a similar story. I don't know that I have much interest in telling stories that, like you say, are what I consider to be a little bit more surface level stuff. Like, yeah,
yeah,
slam the beers on. Let's see what kind of slam the beer down. Let's see what kind of kill shot we can get. Ultra slow mo, 600 frames a second, and watch the arrow explode behind a deer. I I think that stuff certainly has a place, but what gets me excited to sit down and, like you say, like spend a bunch of hours editing things, is generally stories that I feel like transcend just the visuals, right?
yeah,
That's not, visual stuff is great. But I don't think it's a good place to compete, right? Because a lot of it relies on luck. And then a lot of it relies on your budget, stuff like that. Like when I was starting out, we would never worry about getting crazy amazing wildlife footage. And the reason being is you're never going to outcompete like the BBC,
hmm
right? They're going to have their, they do what is it?
Planet Earth,
Yeah, Planet Earth, right?
so good.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, I love that. I sit down, I'm like, holy cow, unbelievable. But I wouldn't so and because of that, I wouldn't get caught up in the field being like, oh well, is this footage, you know, planet Earth?
Yeah.
Obviously you shoot for that, but that isn't, in my opinion, that's not the road to differentiate yourself. It's not the road to, whatever quote unquote success.
Yeah. No, that's true. I hadn't thought about that before. And I got like my start, well, not my start, but as a child and even until now, but I used to be obsessed with the Discovery Channel, like back when it was actually
Yeah.
wildlife documentaries, not like reality shows.
Yeah.
I mean, I would just watch that all the time. So, and I always like wanted to be a wildlife photographer. So I think that
Oh, cool.
it's just, yeah, looking back, that's cool. But yeah, I think you're right, man. I mean, and that's part of another reason why YouTube frustrates me is because I always strive for really high production quality and production value, but story is really the main driver.
Yeah.
And I could complain about algorithms and stuff too, but I think it's more about the story because, well, you see a lot of very low quality, like, shot on an iPhone or whatever, but like is really good because of the story, right? Or like a viral
Yeah.
video. Um, and I'm not saying I focus more on footage than story. I think I try to do both, but you're right. It's not about like how sick your long range elk shots are. It's the
I mean,
story.
it can be, it can be if you're great at that. And that's, uh, but, just speaking personally, I never really worry too much about that. I mean, obviously you
Yeah,
try and do the best you can, but I never found that to be something I thought I could differentiate
yeah,
my work on.
sure.
But I'm sure some people do. I'm not knocking that at all.
Yeah. Well,
And
anyway,
by the way, I share a little bit of a frustration with, the algorithm or the short 15-second TikTok pieces that everybody loves. Um, I think for a large reason because I don't fully understand it, right? I don't like I'm not
yeah.
really a
I
TikTok user.
heard this the other day. I don't know if it's true, but I heard that the YouTube algorithm literally like boosts content. Like if you have like a professional like codec that you like exported in, it can like tell and it like buries your stuff more than just like cell phone footage or like quote unquote crappy cameras or something. I don't know if that's true or
Yeah.
not, but I have heard that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean,
That's
I'd like to
wild.
think the algorithm reflects, what the audience reflects, right? Like
Yeah.
what they want. And there is a there is a grittiness and a sort of like quote unquote authentic value you get from uh, you know, quote unquote amateur sort of,
Yeah.
footage,
Yeah.
for sure, amateur
Yeah.
coverage. And if you have a compelling enough story, like you said, and I'm not saying like some big giant planned out story with an arc or anything. I'm just
Right.
saying like you got a cool encounter or story or
Hmm.
whatever that can be interesting to people. And I do think, being honest, I think it's unfortunate that someone, potentially like yourself or myself who spends, bajillion hours in the suite and tries to get a story perfect and like pours our heart and soul into something can get out viewed by someone with a
Yeah.
iPhone, for whatever reason.
Here's a sad
That
thing too. I've even talked to a fellow creator. I'm not going to say who, but who literally intentionally makes his edit not as good, or like just kind of dumbs it down, because he thinks people like that better. And I mean, he's doing very well on YouTube. So I don't know.
well, and I think no, by the way, so, like literally, I'm not knocking this. I think that's great. In fact, so and there have been
I just
times
can't
when,
do it. I don't
well,
know.
no, that can be effective, seriously,
I
because you
know.
get a more like authentic feel, right?
Hmm.
Like we're not, and this is something I learned early on, kind of the hard way, but people look at, I think, and I'm going to broadly categorize this, but if you're a viewer of content, right, you have the option to watch Brad Pitt go shoot a bunch of aliens or whatever in a movie or zombies, right? And that's an awesome experience, right? But you're not, when you see Brad Pitt or whoever it is acting, like in your head that these are actors. This isn't real,
Yeah.
right? And so the way that the story gets portrayed to you, told to you, the visuals, the pacing, everything, you have different expectations. And so because it's fake. So when you turn down to what we do, which is more, just by nature, we're covering like real content. These are
Yeah.
documentaries, right?
Hmm.
Um, if you lean too far into thinking you're like Martin Scorsese and you're trying to do these, you
Yeah.
know, I don't know, these sort of narrative type um, pacing or story structures or characters,
Hmm.
people smell it out and they think, oh, this isn't. this isn't real. This isn't a documentary. What is this? It's almost like they get like confused as to what
That
they're watching, I feel
yeah.
like. And I do think that your style of editing plays into that for sure. And I always try and lean into the narrative side as much as I possibly can, but there's a danger there. And I'm sure I've crossed it where people watch me like, I don't know. Is this like, what am I watching here? Is this, and there has been times where we've looked at content and I've been working with editors and we said, okay, let's cut this up in a way that isn't so narrative. Let's make it feel, much more documentary pacing. And even
Hmm.
and it means breaking rules you never do in the narrative space, like, um, familiar with like cutting across the train tracks, those kind of rules. The one in
Oh,
movies and
across the
stuff.
axis.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, like stuff like that can, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, whoa, okay, this feels like a little bit more amateur, but also a little bit more real.
Yeah. Yeah. I just was fixing a clip the other day because I was like, oh, that's not on the axis, so I flipped it to like make it on the right axis.
Yeah, and we do that all the time. Yeah, and when we start journey, start this show, if you notice, I try to have people going from left to right, because that's the traditional way you'd start a story, left to right, and
Oh.
right to left if you're leading
Yeah.
camp. Yeah.
That is interesting, man. Because yeah, the editing style and production style I come from is like kind of more traditional TV, and it was like it was all like truth based stuff, but it was like I can't ever like not cover a jump cut when I'm talking. Like I have to put some B roll over it or something. Like I just can't
Yeah.
do it. But anyway,
Okay. Yeah. No, I understand that. Yeah.
yeah, we're getting in the weeds, but it is interesting. So it's something to think about. Yeah. Okay. You mentioned a second ago something I want to dig into a little bit
Yeah.
about noticing that you were, more of a storyteller and maybe a hunter second or not at all. I don't know. Talk to me a little bit about growing up and your journey and figuring that out and that whole thing and what that moment was like.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a lot, I know, but
Yeah, no, no. So first of all, going back to when I was like a kid. So my son Flynn, he's 6. So when I was about that age ish, I'm going to use years approximately here, but
sure.
uh, this was before Dad was, Jim Shockey, right? It's before he was a famous hunter. So we
What
go
was he
out.
was he guiding then or what was he doing?
Well, yeah, this is right around that time. So he was just starting to guide around this point, I think.
Okay.
So he was an antique dealer though, right?
Okay.
So he had an antique store in Vancouver, up in Canada. He sold it, and using the money, he and my mom basically, I mean, literally had a tiny little farm. It's nothing, fancy, and they would grow all of our own food. And he would
Oh
go
wow.
fishing and hunting, and and we literally for like 4 year, a 4 year period, we were entirely self-sufficient pretty much. So I
Wow.
remember I have memories of us canning and making sausages and,
Nice.
dad out there with the rototiller, growing all our little, whatever we had, tomatoes and crops and stuff,
Nice.
and chickens and all that. I used to get paid $2 a week to, take all the eggs from the chickens every morning. And they peck the hell out of my
Oh
hands.
yeah. I hate that
So
when they're sleeping on the eggs and you have to go in. That's the worst.
yeah, well, actually the worst part, and I still have memories of this every time I eat eggs, is when, I don't know that I think Dad's a great hunter. I don't know if he was the best at, his chicken farming, and the rooster would sometimes get in with the chickens.
Oh yeah.
And so every once in a while you crack open an egg and it'd be like a bloody mess.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was, yeah.
That's
Anyway,
just part of the
so
game, man.
during
Chickens.
that period, he would be just like, the real deal, going out with his, little bow he had and practicing, and then, trying to hunt deer that would come by the farm every once in a while. And I'd follow him with he wouldn't buy me like, hunting clothes that fit me. So I just like wear his like super baggy stuff. So I wear a sweater that was dragging the grass, and I have my little plastic bow and arrow with a sucker arrow. And I go out there, because Dad was my hero, and I follow him around and shoot my arrow at the deer. And um, anyway,
That's
that was
awesome.
my earliest memories of Dad hunting. And then when he started to get into more serious, into the guiding space, and then and also into the writing space, I remember him sitting there on his laptop writing, hunting stories while I would practice shooting my little pellet gun. Like right in his little office, I put like a big box full of what was it, like rolled up newspapers and stuff,
Yeah,
and I
yeah,
just kind of shoot into that. Totally illegal, but that's what I would do, and I practiced shooting. So I actually became a fairly good shot when I was a kid. Uh, but then at some point, that changed a little. When he started, what was it? Hunting adventures. I remember I was in high school probably at this point, or maybe middle school, and he told me about trying to get on, on the Outdoor Channel at the time, and starting a TV series called Hunting Adventures. And I think I kind of rolled my eyes. I was like, Dad, what a horrible name for a TV series. We can do better than that. Uh, and but yeah, that was so he did Hunting Adventures, and then he started traveling, right? And so when I was in high school, he would take me on many of his trips, and some like crazy places like Africa and all
Yeah.
over the middle, Australia, and so I got to experience the world and the hunting world in a way which uh, I did not fully appreciate at the time.
Yeah.
And looking back now, I do appreciate it. I
Yeah.
look at my kids, I'm like, man, how am I gonna, provide, like, show them the world like my dad did to me?
Hmm.
Uh, and so, yeah, I hunted water buffalo and Cape buffalo and crocodiles and all kinds of stuff that, most
Yeah.
people my age had never, seen in person outside of zoo. So I was very,
I
very,
was
very
talking to
fortunate.
somebody about that today about like traveling in high school when you're just a high school turd and you're like, I just want to go back and be with my friends or whatever. You don't like realize like what you get. But at the same time, it's like baking something into you. I feel like maybe for me, an appreciation of what we have here, but also a love for other cultures and stuff because I've been blessed to travel a lot too. And that's just one of my favorite things in the world is just seeing like going somewhere and literally everything your eye touches is new and like weird. It's
Yeah,
the
no,
best.
of course. Yeah, new and weird. Yeah, and you're
Yeah.
trying different things and you're talking to people that are from completely different
Yeah, I
backgrounds.
love it.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
people where, $20 is a is a life-changing amount of money,
Yeah.
that's crazy. Like those are things that I will never forget from that. And I certainly, looking at the next generation that I'm helping to bring up now, like I want to make sure that they have those experiences.
Hmm.
But of course, like you said, being essentially a kid, it was difficult for me to a appreciate those experiences, but also appreciate that my dad was hunting and taking me around the world and doing
Yeah.
this crazy hunting adventure stuff that people would die for. Like
Yeah.
they give their leg to go on these trips, and they do. They save money for their entire lives to be able to experience these things. And here was I just dawdling around, kind of, yeah, thinking about my buddies back home,
Yeah.
and what our soccer team was doing, and here we're in like a crowd of Cape Buffalo, so sleeping on the ground with like lions coming through the,
Yeah.
the camps and stuff.
That's wild, man.
Uh, anyway, but funnily enough, like full circle on that, and you mentioned in the beginning if I'm a hunter or not a hunter, I do remember there was a specific moment where, and I was older now, but probably still in high school or maybe university, and dad wanted me to go with him to sit for like 7 days on a whitetail stand.
Hmm.
And he'd always been very, even though like in Africa, I obviously was on some pretty fancy hunts. They were never fancy in the way like we weren't. It's not like 5 stars or anything. Like often we'd be running out of food, and there there'd be legit dangers and stuff. And same with whitetail hunting. He never was like, oh, here's a 200 point buck, blast on your first day. He'd make me sit there in Saskatchewan for days, days and days. Like I
Mm.
think he was very leery of spoiling me in that way.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, and he didn't. And I remember kind of actually like despising it because you sit there and I just get cold and wouldn't see anything all day because he's choosing stands that aren't the best stands.
Oh
Um,
gosh.
and like spoiled as all hell. Like looking back, this makes me cringe. And I remember he asked me if I wanted to go, back out with him, and I said, Dad, I kind of don't. Um, and he and that was the first time I remember as being kids. Like I saw a tear go down his eyes,
Oh
and I
wow.
thought, oh, and I remember thinking in my heart, I was like, oh man, this isn't just fun for him. This is I just said
Really.
no to um to being some type of son that I think maybe guys in dad's position, they sometimes, it would be his dream to travel the world with me by his side, doing the hunting adventure stuff. Me being a crazy, hunting or not crazy, like a hunting outdoorsman, following his footsteps. That's a real dream for dad. And, I kind of broke it at that point. And so, yeah, that's something I think about. But last thing I'll say about all this is going full circle. Those early days of dad bringing me out there with a sweater, dragging in the grass and my little plastic bow, and those are the type of things that I want to at some point here, introduce my children into. Those are experiences I still now I'm like, oh, if I could do anything, any of everything we did, all the crazy adventures, that would be the stuff that I would do. Walk in the fields with my dad, with my little bow, with my hero beside me, and try and do something that everybody in America is able to, well, not everybody, but like, it's very accessible to everybody, which is the
Yeah,
idea that you can hunt something to provide for your family.
absolutely, man. Yeah, and that's the end of the day. What it's all about is family and those beautiful memories and stuff, man. That's a great um, picture. You trudging along with the old man with the suction cup bow.
Yeah.
um,
I have a memory of me actually hitting a deer with that, with a little suction
oh
bow. He
yeah,
he said it never went more than, 5 yards in front of us, and
yeah.
I wasn't never got close. But
That's cool, man. Well, do you think part of that also because my dad was very successful in his own way, not anything hunting or even media related at all, but in his own way, he was very successful, and um, he at some point wanted me to follow in his step, be a businessman or like a CEO or whatever, and I think they probably had a point in time where they realized that was not happening too, and so very different, but also similar. But do you think that like you're going more to the route of being a producer and a storyteller was kind of maybe some way of wanting to do your own thing? Because like I always had this drive to, yeah, I could take over dad's business maybe or whatever, but like I want to like blaze my own trail, set my own course, and especially coming from someone with a very successful dad and family, you think that was part of your motivation maybe?
100%. Yeah. Yeah. Storytelling and the direction I chose was a way to differentiate what I was doing from what he was doing. I think there's some realities there too. Dad in front of the camera is able to, talk very poetically, and sort of be, I think this was played out, as his shows became popular, be someone that resonates, right,
Yeah.
with audiences. I don't think I could have done that. I'm just not that type of person.
Mm.
But yeah, dad's footsteps are being a kid. I mean, your dad's footsteps are gigantic, right? It's like, how
Yeah.
am I supposed to fill those? And I don't know that I could have just by following along. And I think that works for some people. And it sounds like you've had a similar experience. But yeah, definitely as a son, I felt that deep down I wanted to differentiate what I was doing from, you know, my
Yeah.
dad's work.
Isn't your uncle Jeremy Shockey?
Okay, so we are. Dad talks about Jeremy Hush a lot, actually. I don't know that we're related. I think that we could
Okay.
we are related, like, but
I
we're not
thought
going to
I
see
thought
him
he was like
until.
a close family relation or something.
No,
Okay.
no, I don't know him. I don't think we're going to go to the local like Shockey gathering and see him there. But apparently, we are related, some way.
Okay. I was like, man, talk about some genetics in that family. Wow.
Yeah, that guy's.
Um, yeah. So yeah, man. Well, I know, your family had just gone through a tragedy, losing your mom. And I kind of followed along with your dad through that whole thing. And sorry for your loss, man. I know that must be really, really difficult. Not looking forward to that part of life that we all have to usually get to. But
Yeah.
I don't know, man. What did you learn, I guess, about life and the importance of family, or what did you learn through kind of walking through that whole process with your family?
Yeah, great question. Yeah. So a couple things. When we found, so first of all, I don't know if everybody knows this, but my mom passed away from cancer this last September, and it was about a 2 year long sort of battle. Initially, they gave her, a few months. They said, 4 months basically in the outside. She made it 2 years. It was lung cancer. And it was interesting because it hit us completely unexpectedly.
Mm,
My mom, dad's out there, staring down charging hippos and, basically nearly dying in every trip. And, he'd take a plane out somewhere, a bush plane, and then the next trip, the bush plane would, crash with everybody on board. Like, dangerous stuff and very stressed. Mom was always, she'd, whatever, have her omega 3s every day and her blueberries, and she'd walk every day,
yeah.
eat like, what we consider very healthily. And and then one day, she started coughing, and they did a scan, and like, yeah, you've got a few months to live.
Mm,
So that hit us very hard. My sister and I were living in different parts of North America. We flew back the next day, and So in the early stage of this, the one thing that struck me was when we got back home, my sister and I are not like traditional families per se, and that we aren't around really, right? So we don't see each other. We're not generally all in one room very often. Maybe once or twice, maybe once a year,
Hmm.
at conventions or something. And certainly with kids, we're just
Yeah.
busy. So and that's unfortunate. So anyway, my sister and I, my mom and dad, we got to hang around the house, and it was, and even right now, and maybe this is true for people listening, but I wake up in the morning, I'm like, okay, what do I have to do today? I've got a podcast, we've got, I've got a bunch of calls I'm gonna make. I got to bring the kids to school, and I say words like, I've got to bring the kids to school,
Mm.
right? Like I have to do this, uh, or like I have to take this call, and it's so easy to get caught up in our sort of, our 9 to 5, our daily just routine we have, and to even get, first of all, get riled up about, facile things like, oh, like how long is this going to take from when I go through my Starbucks drive through? Or to, and again, to, say like, hey, wow, this child I get to spend, these precious moments with, which at some point I won't,
Yeah.
uh, you know, gets to, or I get to take this person to school and hang out and play 20 questions, whatever, talking about on the way there. Uh, I appreciate that more now because going back with my sister and dad and my mom in our house, we'd sit around our little table at night, just like we did when I was growing up. And we'd, tell our little stories just like I did when I was growing up.
Mm.
Um, the 2 weeks that my sister and I spent up there are the equivalent literally of like a year of my life right now in terms of like in terms of the quality of that time,
Oh,
because
wow, okay.
we are made aware that that time is, and I hate using this term because it's overused, but like this time is very precious.
Yeah.
We are not going to have this again. And I think that, you know, the one takeaway from this last couple of years is that you and all of us, I think it's so easy just to go through life and not really think about it. Um, we all, I guess it's an ego thing. I don't know, but we all think, death will come at some point, but it's closer than we think. And it might be really, really, really close.
Yeah.
It could be tomorrow. It could be today. I could get done this podcast, go out there in my truck and get,
Yeah.
rear-ended by a semi or something. Uh, so yeah, just the time and the quality of it was something that came out of that as almost like a positive. It's very precious
Hmm.
time we got to spend together. Um, yeah, but then the rest of it really, the whole journey sucked. To be honest, it was pretty brutal.
Yeah. I'm sure,
Um,
man. I'm sure
but
it
but
is.
like you say, everybody's got to go through, or you know, hopefully we don't go before our children. So usually it's the children that are around when that process happens. And
Yep.
I don't know that I have any advice on it other than you know, time is precious. Is not just something we should throw around. It's true. It's real. And we get to live every day. We get to live every minute, every hour, and how we choose to spend it is important, and who we choose to spend it with is important.
Yeah. Absolutely, man. Well, yeah, your mom, she looked, obviously didn't know her, but she looked like a very special lady. So, again, sorry for your loss and thanks for sharing that stuff, man. And yeah, I'm always trying to remind myself, like, it's very easy to, like, I got two little kids. Well, I have three kids. Two of them are, anyway, it can get very easy to get annoyed or, like you said, get
Yeah,
in a rush and it's like, all right, just, get in bed, whatever. But like, I just really try to, like, oh, let's read a book tonight and, just enjoy those moments because, yeah, it's just so easy. Like humans, we get used to things so easily, and like maybe that's one reason why I like going on these adventures too, is because it just takes you out of your context for a little bit, and there's a different thing that you enjoy and a different way you connect to the world and God and everything there, and then you come home and it's easier for me to remember. It's a struggle because it's easy to remember that the time is important, but then also you're like looking forward to the next adventure. So
yeah.
it's weird, but you gotta just be intentional with your time. I think that's a great takeaway. But
Well,
um,
just to be clear on that, that's a takeaway I gather, but it doesn't mean that I am that great at following it.
sure,
Even now, you mentioned that like, like last night I was frustrated because my child wasn't going to bed, when they should, and so it's not like I'm following that perfectly, but it's certainly something, like I think all lessons that is there if you it's certainly open my mind a little to that, of
Yeah.
course, and I'll do my best to follow it. But nobody's
Yeah.
perfect.
And enjoying those little moments like, oh yeah, the kid got 10 minutes less sleep tonight, but we shared a moment reading a book together or something, or saying a prayer together, like
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
going to be more impactful than the 10 minutes of sleep.
Yes. Yes.
So anyway, on that note, man, coming close to the time here and you got to run soon. So, remember that. But are there any cool projects or adventures you're looking forward to on the horizon you can share a little bit on or anything like that?
Yeah. Yeah. So what have been so the Once We Were Wolves thing, not to to go full circle back to that, that's a longer form piece, right?
I knew that was a part one.
Yeah, well, it's supposed to be different parts, right? But actually, just even part one being like a 60-minute piece. Um, my whole thing right now is that like, and we've covered TikTok and stuff. I think those mediums are very important, right? Those platforms are important, but they're not necessarily what I find is in the future for me in terms of me personally,
Yeah.
right? Like, I don't know that I can make a 15-second TikTok video any better than anybody else. Um, so I'm trying to double down on something like Once We're Wolves and do more of those longer form projects. And the reason being is,
I love it.
so I think, and using this as an example, I think, what it's 1 point something million people have watched it now, 1.5 million, I don't know.
Wow.
But the average time people spend watching it, if you look at the analytics, is really high. It's like 20 something minutes, 25 minutes. So, literally, and I try to remember this when I'm spending time sitting in front of my computer and my eyes are crossing. 1.5 million times 25 minutes. I don't know what that works out to, but it's a lot.
It's a
I mean,
lot
that's
of
like
watch
literally
hours.
like lifetimes, multiple lifetimes. There's people sitting and watching, work that I've been a part of, and I try and be cognizant of that as I'm moving forward and saying, okay, like how can I make an impact on our industry and hopefully one day of the world too. And I look at something like that project. I have had so many people reach, I mean yourself included, reach out and want to talk about it or say, hey, give me quote unquote compliments or talk about how it's changed them or made them more excited about being in our industry.
Yeah.
Um, very little negative, and I don't think that would happen if I just made a bunch of TikTok videos.
Mm-mm.
So even though a TikTok video can get 1.5 million views, I think it's pretty clear that something like a Once We Were Wolves is a much different impression, right? 1.5 million impressions on that is not the equivalent of 1.5 million people watching a
Right.
TikTok video, in my opinion. So I'm trying to do more of those type projects. I'm trying
Good.
to do longer form projects that uh, are garner meaningful impressions and make a real change. And I'm trying to, but the problem is, as is always a problem in a creative space, is the funding is always difficult, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and
Oh yeah.
and again, I'm in a very blessed position, and for me, it's extremely difficult. So the projects I'm doing, uh, I think we've got one we're going to go shoot up in the Pacific Northwest this fall. I'm really excited about. Should be a longer form project. We're going to go back up to Alaska, actually.
Sweet.
Maybe look at a Once Through Wolves 2 type scenario, which could be really cool. Um, but yeah, the longer form stuff for me is I'm doubling personally. I'm doubling down on that.
That's awesome.
I think we're going too far in the opposite direction. So
Good, man. I'm glad to hear that. And yeah, I always felt like I kind of forgot earlier, but always felt like Once We Were Wolves was like a part one, and it like needed the part two. But anyway, man.
well, it says part one in the beginning. It says
It
it first.
does, and I feel like no one noticed that. I was like, did everyone forget that?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
um, like, did the viewers forget it? Because I felt like no one was talking about it. But anyway, looking forward to that, man. I'm the same way. Like, so out of necessity of the real world and just for fun too, I've been, repurposing, repackaging 1 minute snippets of hunts,
Yeah.
but and releasing those as reels and stuff, which I think is cool. But my heart is with long form too, and so I hope to continue doing that too. And I'm glad to hear you saying you're doing that, man. So anyway, dude, it's been really cool talking to you. I really enjoyed it. Appreciate your time, and I know you got to go soon. So thanks for your time, and yeah, we should stay in touch, man. It's been a good conversation.
It's been a real honor, Hunter. Before we go, really quickly, and I asked this to people if I think about it, but what's one thing I could have done better on Once for Wolves?
Oh man, one thing you could have done better. I'd have
Well,
to think about that, man. You put me on the spot here.
well, you can think about it and send it to me after if you want. And I really mean that. If I'm going to be I think this is true for anything. If you want to get better at something, always try and ask.
Well,
You
I'd
know,
like to watch it again. Could I watch it again? Because it's been like 6 months since I saw it. Can I watch it again and
yeah,
get back to you?
yeah, you don't need to do that, but definitely,
No, I want to. I would like to.
okay. Um,
I
yeah,
will
if you're
definitely give you
interested,
an answer. I don't want to say something right now just to say something, but I'll get back to you.
when you get to it, let me know. I'll write it down and I'll try and, like Cam says, try and be better tomorrow than I was today and better. What is it? Better today than I was yesterday and better tomorrow than I am today.
Okay. Have you? I'm putting you on the spot since you did it. Have you had a chance to see anything I've put together yet?
I've not.
Okay.
No, but I will. Send
So
me.
if I watch Once Free Wolves again and send you my thoughts, will you watch something of mine
I
and tell
love
me
this.
how I could do
Yes.
better?
Yes. Send me what I
Okay.
should watch and I'll do it.
Deal.
I love
All
it.
right, man. Thanks again. Yeah. Good talking to you.
Likewise, Hunter. Thanks so much.